Absolutely.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the Compassionate, the Merciful, I am very delighted to be with you, and I wish we could meet in person, but at least Zoom gives us ability to see each other and listen to each other even from distance. So maybe there are people that if we had a physical meeting, they were not able to attend. So this is also side advantage. I would like to share with you a personal history about the way I was involved in ethics, and also something about some of the characteristics of Shia Islam. For me personally, it was very much part of my own formation to study ethics, but in the general form of spirituality, because technically we may have different understanding of ethics. But since I entered the seminary of Qom in the, at the age of 17, I decided that I have to go to seminary. I was studying in Tehran, and I was in a special school which was founded before revolution, and we were in the third year of the secondary school that revolution took place. And this school was for talented students, and mainly to train them to become scientists, or for example, technocrats, etc. So after 2-3 years after revolution, I was just teenager. I had interest in religion, but I was not able to find my answers for deep questions that I had. I used to read every book available in Farsi. I had a cupboard full of books on aqaid, proving existence of God. I didn't have any scholar in the family to ask questions. I had some good teachers in the school, but I was not convinced, and maybe because my mind was not also prepared. I didn't have, maybe background, and also I didn't have access to, great scholars. So just in the last year of my high school, I said to my father, I want to go to Qom. We were in Tehran. So I said, I want to go to Qom. Because I find that without finding answers to my questions, I have no interest. And my father is not a clergyman, and we didn't have actually any clergyman in close family members. But thanks to God, he didn't object, and he said, we can go and meet someone in Qom who is related to one of our relatives, and ask for his advice. Anyway, to make the story short, we went to Qom, and he said, no, it's good if he comes now. He doesn't need to complete his high school, the final year. So I had the blessing of my father and later mother. So I went to the seminary at the age of 17, and I didn't even want to complete my high school. And I said, I can do it later, because we have a system of, just taking exams if you can study yourself. So from the beginning of my entry in seminary, I had two things always clearly connected with each other in my mind. Of course, I am not a scholar. I'm just a young, teenager who had studied some books. And that was, I need to study philosophy and I need to work on spirituality. So when a teenager comes to this conclusion, this shows that this must be something common in the teachings of the Shia scholars, especially people I was reading a lot, like Ayatollah Mutahari at that time. So from beginning, I had interest in studying philosophy and spirituality. Part of it is ethics, part of it is mysticism, etc. But as you know, in the Shiite seminaries, we have a long process of training. So sometimes I say to my friends, I say, for us 7-8 years is just to warm up. If you want to become a good scholar, 15-20 years is the minimum of study. And so we have to go through a very sophisticated process of studying, Arabic and logic and prepare and build ourselves, But I had interest in philosophy. I couldn't start philosophy. I had to wait for some years. But anyway, as much as I had opportunity taking, lessons in addition to lessons offered in the seminary, reading, etc., I tried to work on these two areas together. And this continued in all these decades of my study. Intellectual discussions and also spiritual discussions. And I think it had great impact on my formation. Later, when I was writing a book on Shi'i Islam for Islamic College, this is about 2000, 2001, I was involved in this writing. I was thinking, in addition to normal questions, like what is the origin of this faith, what is the story of the development of this faith, their references, their doctrines, their practices, their statistics, their holy cities. In addition to these questions, which I try to answer in different chapters of this book, maybe my readers would expect me to give them something about the spirit of Shia Islam. What is the general spirit? What is the general flavor of Shia Islam? So I was thinking, and without any precedence, I came to this conclusion. And since then, I have been thinking, more. I have given, lectures on this, and I am more convinced than ever that there are three things that should exist together in a true Shia. Not every Shia is a true Shia. And also, this is not exclusively something about Shia. Maybe Sunnis can welcome this. Maybe Christians can welcome this. I have stories, that I will share with you. Maybe that even some of my Christian friends welcomed this. But for me at that time, writing this book about Shi'i Islam, I was convinced that if we want to be loyal to the spirit of this school of Islam, we need to have three things together. One, rationality. Rationality is very important feature of Shia Islam. Of course, not rationality in modern sense. It has its own explanation. reason or intellect is one of the main sources for understanding Islam according to Shia Islam. But it's not only for understanding, it's for practice, for making any decision. Anything has to be rational. And we don't have any place for something which would be against reason. Yes, maybe something is above reason, but not against reason. We don't want to go into that discussion right now. But rationality is one thing. And this is, you see, many Shia have interest in philosophy. Second, spirituality. Spirituality is also very important in the school of al-Bayt, and you find many manifestations for that, in particular emphasis on prayer and supplications and going beyond rituals and finding deep spiritual connection with God, and then with the creation through your acts of worship. And third, search for justice. For the Shia, not only divine justice is a principle, but this has to be echoed in social justice. And social justice connects us with the messengers who are sent by God according to the Quran to help people establish social justice, up to the Prophet, Imam Ali, Imam Hussein, and Imam Mahdi, who is going to lead people in establishing social justice and equity and solidarity all over the world. So search for justice is very present in the history of the Shia. There have been many movements against tyrant caliphs who claim to be Islamic rulers, but many of them unfortunately were just misusing the name of Islam, and the followers of this school were many times in the history opposing to their injustice and being prosecuted, being killed or imprisoned. All our imams, apart from the 12 who in occultation, were killed by the caliphs who claimed to be Muslims also. So search for justice along with spirituality, along with rationality, is a combination that would convince your mind and heart and would put into right order your dunya and akhirah, this world and the hereafter. And you can see how my approach from the time I entered the seminary continued and put me into this direction, and then after that also the same. And I remember when in 2006 I went to the airport in Tehran to receive 4 of our Catholic guests. Chris knows, I think, many of them. So there was late Abbot Timothy Wright, and also was Father Bonaventure from Ampleforth, and Michael Barnes and Antonio Mohoni from Hithrop College. So these were my guests, and they were visiting us. Abbot Timothy was coming to home for the second time. So Michael, who is a very established, very learned Jesuit professor, he asked me a question, and this is midnight from airport to Qom. He asked me, what is the difference between Sunni and Shia? And I said, to myself, how can I answer this in this time and, in this short period? But it's very important also for our guests to have some idea. And, you can give different answers. You can, mention what happened in the history. You can mention some doctrines, some methodological issues that they differ. Of course, along with all the common things that they have. and all the mutual love and respect that many of them reciprocate for each other, despite of course some problems that also sometimes existed. But I thought, let me tell him these three. So I said, Shia try to have these three together: rationality along with spirituality and search for justice. I am not saying every Shia has done this, but I'm saying this is the general spirit, and this is what we learn from the Prophet and his family. This is what we see in our great leaders. But it's not that every single Shia is necessarily observing all these three. So Michael very much liked this, and when we had discussions in Qom later, when I came to London again, for 1 year I was for my sabbatical in Hithrop College, 2006, 2007, he was referring many times to these three, meaning that for a Catholic also these three can be very interesting: spirituality and rationality and search for justice. The last time I saw him was in American Academy of Religion some years ago, and he was writing a book, and he said one chapter is about these three. Some years ago, I was invited to attend dialogue between World Council of Churches and Iranians, the Shia from Iran. And the topic was about how to avoid violence in the name of religion. And I told them that I think if we manage to have these three together, we would not have violence. And then our Christian friends, many of them were Protestants, because the World Council of Churches is mostly Protestants and Orthodox, and Vatican is an observer but not a member. So many Protestant and Orthodox Christians also, they said, we also accept these three, we appreciate these three. So in this framework of rationality along with spirituality and search for justice, I would like to share with you some aspects of ethical teachings of the al-Bayt, or the Prophet and his holy household. I want to mention some of the important points. I cannot do justice. I cannot be exhausting everything, and I am sure many of you are also already familiar with this. Maybe some of you are actually experts in these fields. I don't know everyone, but I share with you something that I hope would be useful. I have also some publications and lectures about ethics. Actually later what I did was, in addition to my study of Islam in the seminary, I did my Western philosophy at Tehran University, and I did my MA dissertation on After Virtue by Alistair McIntyre. And then I did my PhD in Manchester on ethical relativism, which is published. So I have different publications on ethics, but if you want to get a fragrance of ethical teachings of the Shia, maybe this book, Lessons on Islamic Morals, is something good to begin with. This is a book that starts with some chapters on definition of the science of akhlaq and how Muslim scholars developed this, what was their understanding, some of the major works, some of the recent developments in this field. For example, with some friends, when I was in Iran, we managed to introduce a degree on ethics, a master's degree on ethics, and then we introduced PhD on comparative ethics and also on medical ethics. So there are lots of development. We have journals now in the seminary on ethics. So in the beginning of this book, I mentioned these points about the context, and then I try to give a brief account of content of ethics in the school of al-Bayt. Muslim scholars have followed different patterns in classifying ethical teachings of Islam. Some people divide it into individual and social. But another way is to divide it into 4 categories. What ethical principles and values you should observe with respect to yourself. We have lots of things that even if we live alone, still would be applicable because it's about ourselves. For example, we have to go by reason. We need to seek truth. These are many things that even if you are alone would be applicable. The second realm is what you should observe with respect to God. The third is what you have to respect with what you have to observe and respect about your relation with others. In Islam and in many other religious traditions, your relation with God and your relation with people are very closely connected. I cannot think of someone getting closer to God and not more kind with people, not more caring for people. Islamic spirituality has God at the center, but also then for the sake of God, we have to be loving and caring for all creatures of God. So the third point or the third area is ethical values in our relation with other people in general, or specific categories of people. People who are, for example, our kinship, or people that have some special rights over us, like our teachers. People who are in more need, like elderly members of the society, people who are ill, people who are poor, people who are strangers, etc. So we have lots of teachings about this. And the fourth area is what ethical values we should observe in relation with the environment or non-human being creatures. So in this book, I have tried to bring these teachings in 23 lessons for someone who wants to have some holistic understanding of Islamic ethics. Also, in Islamic lifestyle series, which is some 80 lectures, I have followed the book Mafatihul Hayat by Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, who is one of the most leading Shia scholars and philosophers and ethicists, and also something similar, again in 4 categories. Many detailed points about Islamic ethics are presented. So you have now a kind of framework. Ethics with 4 major compartments, with 4 major areas. What you should observe with respect to yourself, what you should observe with respect to God, what you should observe with respect to people and in general or different groups of people, and what you should observe with respect to every creature of God. For example, about soil, about water, about birds, about plants, everything. Muslim ethicists say that there is nothing in our voluntary actions and in qualities which we have a say about them, those things which are not fixed by creation, virtues, vices, which we have a kind of ability to change them, to remove them, to bring them, and all our voluntary actions. There is nothing except ethics has something to say about it. Islamic ethics is responsible to clarify for Muslims every single action that they must do or they must avoid, every single word, every single practice, even intentions. So all of them are covered in Islamic ethics. And in the school of al-Bayt or in Shia Islam, there has been always great interest in ethics because, as I said, a rational approach to religion along with spirituality and justice would avoid ritualism, would avoid just doing things as a routine, would avoid making religion void from deep connection with God and just becoming a robot that has certain tasks to do or certain things to say, and sometimes be empty from mercy, from love, that unfortunately sometimes we see some believers who are not careful about ethics and spirituality and have not adopted rational approach exhibit. So what I want to share with you in this time that we have is few aspects. I cannot go into all these virtues and values, but I can share with you some aspects of this system of thought about ethics that might be helpful in developing a general idea. And again, this doesn't mean that it's exclusive to the Shia Islam. Maybe other people also would be saying that we welcome and we believe the same. That's great. I am not here in the position of undermining or underestimating any other school or any other religion. I am just trying to speak with maximum loyalty to the truth, without any bias, based on the sources, based on what I understand between me and God. I am going to share, but if these are shared by other people and other religions, that's great. And so there is nothing to suggest that Shia believe in this and other people don't believe in this. I am not doing such comparison now. So before I start with the first characteristic, I would like to have a pause. If you have any ideas, any questions, anything about what we have discussed so far, please, feel free. And then maybe after that we can have a little break, and then inshallah start the second part. Mr. Azad, are you doing to moderate the session?
Dr. Shomali, yes, I can moderate. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can do the moderation, or if people want to ask questions, they can unmute themselves. This is what everyone has been doing, but it doesn't need much of moderation. So, but there is also
because sometimes they raise their hand and then
yes,
you can.
Course. Yeah, I will be here and I will do the moderation. And there is a question in the chat box. It's a pretty long one.
Mm-hmm.
No, that is not a question. The last one. No, sorry. That was a
previous discussion.
Yeah, that was a previous discussion before your arrival. So far, I think we're good to go, and there is no questions. But if people want to ask questions, please feel free to start asking the questions. Dr. Shomali, may I ask a question myself?
Sure.
These important three characteristics that you were talking about, I was wondering if these are, I was reflecting on them, and I think that, do you mean that these are the spirit of the teachings of al-Bayt, or you also want to say that this, can this be also a descriptive account of the communities or not? Can we describe a certain community, or at least a part of the Shia communities, as having these characteristics in practice, or this is the ideal that we need to work on achieving?
Yeah. So these three are, first of all, what can be easily understood from our sources. So if we go to the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, we find these three.
Right.
Secondly, we find them reflected in the life examples of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt and great Shia leaders and scholars.
Right.
But when it comes to community level and to individuals, I think, at least for me, maybe I am wrong, I can see that in large there is compliance with these three, but if I want to go into parts and individuals and smaller communities, unfortunately we find cases that people were not able to have these three together. And even for myself, I don't claim I can have, I'm able to show all my life was, exhibiting these three together. I try. So it's not just an ideal, it is present in the history of the Shia in large, but it doesn't mean that every movement that Shia communities took or Shia leaders took was always in compliance with these three. But in large, yes. So this is a general flavor, a general taste of the Shia teachings and history.
Right. And can we also say like this, that all the teachings, all the instructions, all the do's and don'ts and anything that Ahlul and the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt and even the Quran says, can all of them be summed up or let's say summarized or be placed under one of these three categories or not?
Yes. Actually, I think everything has these three together. If you go to our aqaid, if you go to our fiqh, if you go akhlaq, if you go to judiciary system, family life, community life, how to interact with people of other faith, everything should exhibit these three.
So even aqaid, which is an important part of, for example, tawheed, or anything which is an important part of the creed, or
yes,
what a Muslim should believe, can also be placed under these three, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Ayatollah Jawad Ahmadi has a good example. Once some Christian friends, we went to visit him, and about the role of reason or intellect or aql in religion, he said, some people say reason is like a scale. Everything has to be weighed and measured according to reason. This is not adequate. Although we believe that we should not contradict reason, but we don't say everything has only one scale to be checked against, and that is intellect, because we have things which are beyond, not against. But for example, there are things that through revelation we understand. There are things that through mystical experience we may understand. So we don't want to say if religion has something, it has only be checked by aql. This means that you are forcing aql on all other types of understanding. That, for example, it's like, for example, if someone says, what is the taste of ice cream? And someone says, you have to use your aql only. Okay, how can I understand with my aql the taste of ice cream? Or how can I understand with my aql the fragrance of rose? So there are things that have their own ways of understanding, but nothing would contradict reason. That's the main thing. Not that we don't have other ways of understanding. So he said to say it's the only scale is not complete. Some people say reason is like the key. If you want to enter religion, there are many claims, many religious claims. You have to use reason to open the key, to open the lock for the room which has true religion. So this is another analogy. Some people say it's good because it helps us to distinguish between true religion and false religion. But he said even this is not adequate, because when you enter the room, you don't need the key. It means that you need reason to come to religion, but inside religion, you don't need reason. He said, this is not our understanding. Our understanding is, and I think this is very compatible with the, all our teachings, that reason is like a torch. You need this torch to find the door. You need this torch to open the door, and you need it when you are inside the room. So it's not that reason brings us to religion. Reason should also be always with us when we study our texts, when we analyze our traditions. We always need reason, but reason along with spirituality, reason along with humility, not with arrogance. So we should have all these together so that we can have a balanced approach.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yeah.
I think Sadiq has also a question because he's raising his hand. So Sadiq, you can go forward and ask his question.
Yes.
Sadiq, I think you're unmuted. You can start talking.
Dr. Shomali, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
You have my voice?
Yes.
The question, I think it occupies my mind for a long time, but it's not so challenging. And my question is that, as we always say that Shia, as a great and spiritual religion, always is seeking peace. And you just mentioned seeking justice as a pillar for our deen, our religion. So what's the relation between seeking peace and seeking justice? Are they related to each other or not? Thank you.
You're welcome. Awesome. Yeah, actually, justice is the foundation for every virtue. According to Muslim ethicists, justice is the virtue which has no exception. In other words, justice is the complete cause, is al-illatu tamma for moral goodness. Because, for example, telling the truth can be sometimes harmful to the extent that telling truth may not be moral. Like what? Like, for example, if by telling the truth to a criminal you endanger the life of an innocent person and show where that innocent person is. This criminal is going to kill him. Here, morally telling the truth is not good. And then they explain, the late Sheikh Muzaffar has a beautiful explanation, and he says, because goodness for telling truth is something which is there if there is no obstacle. In other words, telling truth has muqtazi for goodness, but there can be sometimes obstacles. It's not illat tamme, it's just muqtazi. Adl is illat tamme for goodness, but telling truth is muqtazi, means if there is no obstacle, no overriding factor, nothing that would overweigh goodness of telling the truth, then it is good. But if there is a greater harm, which is of course very clearly defined in jurisprudence, then telling truth may not be morally advisable. And then we have things which are neither like justice nor like telling the truth, like speaking. Speaking is not even muqtazi for goodness. Speaking is neutral. So if you bring good reason along with speaking, it becomes good. If you don't bring good reason, it's neutral. If you bring bad reason, you speak with bad reason, it becomes bad. So at the same time that we believe in realism and objectivism in ethics, but we don't say everything has fixed position. There are things which have fixed position, there are things which can change, but if they are left to themselves, everything being equal, they have a moral status, and there are things which are neutral and we have to bring from outside. So when it comes to adl, to justice, they say justice is the most fundamental virtue, and this is also of course very much in line with the Aristotelian approach to, faculties of the soul, and how justice is when you have the balanced position in all the faculties. If you have wisdom, and if you have modesty, and if you have bravery, these three together, so means that in the faculty of rationality and anger and appetite, in all these faculties you have reached balanced position, you have justice. So similar to that, Muslim ethicists say justice is the most fundamental value, and therefore anything good like peace must be based on justice. So if we observe justice, we can have peace. And if we go for, injustice, then peace cannot be maintained or even established in the first place. It is interesting
so can we say
that
peace is a consequence or result of justice?
So peace can be in different degrees. Sometimes you can have a kind of temporary peace, which is like a ceasefire. But enduring peace cannot be achieved without justice and without truth. And actually in the Catholic tradition also, they also have this idea that truth and justice and love are needed for peace. So Muslim ethicists have similar approach, that justice is very, very fundamental for having peace, and we have to work for peace. Otherwise it means we are compromising about justice.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome.
Hamid.
Salam alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Can I ask my question?
Yes, Brother Nasrawi Muhammad. Yes, you can ask your question. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Salam alaikum, Dr. Shomali. Long
Alaikum
time not see you. I miss you. If you remember, I see you in London, in Islamic Center. I have a question about, as you know, I interested in the concept of utopia. There is a hadith from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that say, إني بعثت لأتمم مكارم الأخلاق. So what is the the relationship between Islamic utopia and its ethic? Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you. In an ideal state, ethics is the governing power. Nothing like ethics and spirituality can develop all potentials of human beings. Even law, even religious law is not enough. Religious law is to fix the boundaries, but you need to do something in these boundaries. For example, if you want to do farming, you can say, okay, this is the area of your land. You shouldn't go beyond, because then it's land of other people. This is the boundaries. Also, these are the things that you cannot farm. They are illegal, for example. Okay. But you have to do something. You cannot just observe the boundaries and limits and legal points. You need to work with passion, with love on your land, to cultivate your land, to grow something. Like family. Family life cannot be just based on legal points, even legal points in Sharia, because these are boundaries. Family life must be based on love, on ethics, on spirituality, on sacrifice, on mercy, on forgiving, on not demanding, on not being selfish. This is all about ethics. Or when it comes to community or to society in large, there are many, many things that can make our life happy, and they are only through ethics and spirituality. If I love my neighbor loves me, if we care for each other, if we have concern for each other, as Islam tells us, then we can have a happy community. But if we are just watching each other and just making sure that we don't commit a crime against each other, this is not enough. If you manage to keep some wolves next to each other without killing and attacking each other, this is not a human community. We shouldn't be wolves that observe law and therefore they know their limits. We should be like angels. We should be real human beings, and this is through ethics. This is through spirituality. Therefore, as you said, it is very famous that the Prophet said, I have been raised as a prophet in order to accomplish noble traits of character. He didn't say to start this, because all the prophets have come. They started this process, and he is going to accomplish this. And it is about makarimul akhlaq, not mahasinul akhlaq. Scholars of akhlaq, ethics say makarimul akhlaq is more demanding than mahasinul akhlaq. Mahasin is good traits of character, like being kind, being giving and supportive. But makarim means being kind to those who are not kind to you. Give to the people who have deprived you. Visit the people that disconnected from you. Rasulullah says, I have come to accomplish makarimul akhlaq, these types of ethics. And if Muslims want to have ideal Islamic society or life, definitely most of it is a matter of ethics. Only a small percentage can be secured through law and legal requirements. Most of it is a matter of ethics. Most of it is a matter of your heart and what virtues are there, or God forbids what vices are there. So I think your point is very
Thank you so
relevant.
much. Thank you so much. It
Thank
was very clearly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Excuse me, others who want to ask questions. I think Hamid has been waiting to ask his questions.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, doctor.
Alaikum assalam.
More than questions, I have some clarifications to ask.
Sure.
And you mentioned at the beginning three main aspects of a true Shia. Rationality, that you define as reason or intellect. The spirituality, that you define as prayers and supplications. And thirst for justice, defined as social justice. First question I have is, since you mentioned rationality first, is that a precondition for the other two? Is that a precondition for spirituality? And that leads me to the other inquiry. As a Sufi, we believe in the superiority of the heart. And one of my teachers used to say, we pray 5 times a day to put the heart above our heads. So how does that come in? What is the relationship between spirituality and rationality in that way? How do we reason our faith? I mean, I don't know if the rationality you're talking about is different from the Greek concept of logos. It might be different because this is from the point of view of Shiism. So I have those clarifications to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome. You know, these three grow also with each other. So unless you are really spiritual, your rationality cannot grow, because there are many problems in the heart that can affect our understanding and can stop development of our intellect. We have some, for example, if I am arrogant, if I am biased, no matter how much I study philosophy, how much I study logic, how much I study, mathematics, etc., my mind may not be able to function properly. Not that it's necessary to make mistake, but it's very common that a selfish, biased person even if he knows all the laws of logic, can fail in having proper evaluation of different claims. So spirituality is very much needed for a thinker, for a philosopher, for a rational person. Actually, when we study the concept of hikmah, wisdom, I have some series on wisdom and practical wisdom. I have two series. One is about wisdom and one is about practical wisdom. Because this is very important, that in understanding of hikmah, you see a spirituality and rationality come together. A wise person, a hakim, is not just an expert on rationality. A wise person is an expert and practitioner of rationality through spirituality. So it's very important. On the other hand, if you say, okay, for 10, 20 years I try to be a spiritual and then rational, this also doesn't work. Because many people who have gone the road of spirituality, unfortunately, then they got stuck at some point, or actually sometimes they went to extremes or wrong directions because they were not thinking deeply through every step of their journey, of a spiritual journey. And sometimes they undermined the rulings of reason. I normally in the lectures I have on characteristics of Shia Islam, when I talk about the three, I mention this hadith. And if you are interested, I can share with you the link for those lectures. Even, for example, there's one lecture on these three that you can find, what I mean by rationality, what I mean by spirituality. For example, there is a hadith from our seventh Imam, Imam Kazim. Imam Kazim, the father of Imam Reza. So Imam Kazim is buried in Kazimain in Baghdad. He has a hadith to Hisham ibn Hakam. And he says, God the Almighty has two hujjah, two ways of communicating His will to us. One is external, one is internal. The external hujjah or proof are prophets, messengers, imams. The internal hujjah or proof is intellect. Both are hujjah of God. So on the day of judgment, God would ask me whether I obeyed both or one or none. I should have obeyed both. So there is no way to follow truly the teachings of the prophets and then contradict decisive judgment of intellect. No conflict at all. There is 100% harmony between intellect and teachings of the prophets, if we understand them well. Some scholars have used this analogy. They say, if it was possible to bring prophets inside you, internalize prophets, that would be your intellect. And if it was possible to bring your intellect out, that would be prophets. So, if we understand them both, and it's not easy, this is why we need a scholarship, we need people who have both to teach us and to be mentoring us. If we have both rationality and spirituality with proper balance, each of them helps the other. If we are not doing the right way, each of them stops the other. And then you have to choose either this or that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Muhammad Abbas and Sister Monzala both have been waiting. So, yeah, Muhammad, please.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Sir, my question was, every religious person claims his or her religion is the most perfect religion, the best religion. So what is the special or unique with 12ers? Why should I be a 12er, not a Jew, a Christian, or other religion?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very important question, and if you want, you can listen to my lectures about unity of God and unity in God, and also lectures about the concept of religion and the concept of the book in the Quran. In brief, what we can understand from the Quran is that there is only one religion. God has sent one religion through all the prophets and messengers. This religion is the religion of surrendering yourself to the absolute truth. No prophet has brought a new religion and said, previous religion is false or it's, outdated. I have a new religion. No, there's only one religion. And our prophet didn't want to give a new name to this code. Some people think Islam is a new religion founded by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but Islam is not a new religion founded by him. Islam is a new call to the same religion. All prophets called for surrendering to the truth. So, what is important is not titles we carry. I am Muslim or Jews or Christians, etc. What is more important is do your best in understanding the best available presentation of the truth and commit yourself to the truth. Do your best in finding out the best available presentation of the truth and commit yourself to the truth. Calling yourself Sunni, Shia, Christian, Jew, etc. is not going to solve the problem. And this is why Quran says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَالَّذِينَ هَادُوا وَالنَّصَارَى وَالصَّابِئِينَ مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا فَلَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ. You can be a Muslim, you can be Christian, a Jew, a Sabi, but these are titles. مَنْ آمَنَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. Whoever has true faith in God and the hereafter, وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا, and does righteous deeds, they have their reward with their Lord. So, we need to make sure that we open ourselves to the truth. We can see the truth everywhere. Unfortunately, some of us, we don't want to see the truth except in our own group and our own community. We have to open ourselves to the truth and look for the truth everywhere, because every truth is a manifestation of God, no matter where you find it. Open yourself to the truth. Try to act according to the truth. Then don't, judge about other people. It's up to God. Maybe there are Sunnis who are better than me. Maybe there are Christians who are better than Muslims. Maybe there are Muslims who are better than Christians. Maybe Jews are better. Maybe Christians are better. Maybe it's not a title. It's individual by individual. Every individual has its own judgment. How truthful this person is, how virtuous this person is, how God-centered this person is, how much he is reflecting light to other people, how much you are giving peace to other people, how much you are making life of other people miserable or nice. This is what is important, and always try to find the best available presentation of the truth.
Thank you very much. And the last question is for Sister Monzela.
Salam Sheikh, thank you for the wonderful discussion. So my question is, with regards to ethics and law, what specific role should ethics play with regards to law? So what relationship should they have with each other? Should they function as co-equal branches parallel to each other alongside other branches? Or is there room that ethics could actually inform law? So could it serve as an independent source of law or alongside the other four, or could it be incorporated into Ahl? Is there room then within our sources of law to absorb ethical principles, even individualistic virtue ethics or any other ethics, and potentially grow as well? Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a very good question, and we had some dissertations and theses in Com actually about this question, the relation between akhlaq and fiqh, or between ethics and law. It's a very important question, and the brief answer is law is more something that is geared at securing minimal perfection for the average people. If we follow Islamic, for example, law, Sharia, we would have minimum which is possible for every average person to observe. Of course, there can be exceptional cases that even this minimum cannot be done. Then we have secondary rulings in Islam. For example, sometimes there are emergencies that someone cannot, for example, make wudu and make tayammum. But in general, what average person, young, old, man, woman, from village, from city, educated, uneducated, from west, from east, average people can do is introduced in the form of law. And also law has its own way of sanctioning. Normally, law is something that can have, not always, can have also some kind of external sanction. But ethics is something that is not pleased with the minimal perfection, minimal happiness. Ethics tells you you can go higher and higher. But we cannot expect this from everyone, but those who have aspiration for closeness to God and higher degrees of perfection, after making sure that they do certain things which are required by law, they have to make sure that in the actions and more so in their characteristics of soul, they follow ethics, they follow spirituality and akhlaq together. And therefore here you sometimes have different degrees, different stations, different manazil. Let me give you an example. For example, if there is a person who is starving, law, Islamic law says that you must save his life. If there's innocent person, not that, for example, someone that has to be executed because, he's a criminal, etc. There are lots of details. But, ordinary people, we need to save their lives. Even we need to save lives of animals. So, someone is starving, I have to give him food or monies to buy food. But how much? What type of food? From legal perspective, what saves his life? You don't need to give him more than what he saves his life from legal perspective. So in other words, if you don't give him what saves his life, you have committed a sin. But if you give him a simple food, it's enough. But from Islamic akhlaqi perspective, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You have to give him what you love, not remaining of food in the fridge, which is for few days in the fridge and you don't want to eat, you give it to this person. Not just a piece of dried bread, for example. No, what you love to eat, you have to give to that person. We don't say this is legally binding so that you have committed a sin if you don't give, the food that you love, but we say from spiritual perspective you have failed. If you have not shared or not even shared, sometimes Islam says you have to give priority. Sometimes I have a food that I love and I share. This is muwasat. Sometimes I have a food that I love and I don't have enough. I just give to other person and I say, okay, I don't want today. This is إيثار يؤثرون على أنفسهم ولو كان بهم خصاصة. This is akhlaq. So law lays the foundation for us and the framework, but then we have to equip this. We have to bring furniture, we have to bring lights. It's not just enough to have the framework. Law is like a box to keep you secure, but then to make this box a home is different.
Thank you, Sheikh.
You're welcome. Ahsantum.
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor. I just have one more question.
Yes, please.
Regarding this subject you were talking about, what is, in your understanding, the difference between law and justice?
Justice is partly served by law. Islamic law serves justice, but partly is also served by ethics. Sometimes law cannot help because, for example, it's in private or it is about heart. Law cannot interfere with private things most of the time, and also with something, for example, which is internal. In both law and ethics, we must serve justice. We must work for materialization of justice. For example, if in my actions I don't do injustice, I don't do zulm to anyone in my action, but if in my heart I become suspicious, and not only suspicious, even I allow myself to judge people, and someone who is nice, I think that he's a bad person, and even without saying to anyone, in my heart, because of bias, because of suspicion, because of rushing, I accuse someone of a bad action or quality in my heart. Law may not say anything about this, but akhlaq and ethics say this is wrong. Quran says, اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم. you must avoid many of suspicions, because some of them are sins, but you have to avoid even those which are not